meetings are very expensive from a company perspective. If you put 12 people in a meeting room, you're costing your company a couple $1,000 if you're in the US.
Yeah.
So
I'm just thinking on the meetings that I did while I was at Microsoft that worked well. There was always an outcome, right? I always had an outcome. Hey all, thank you for showing up to this meeting. The aim of this meeting is for us to align on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to start meetings as well, because it kind of helps everyone align. Say, okay, this is where we're going towards. Now, if one Agbero has his own context, right? Or has his own side agenda, right?
Yep.
And he's trying to then kind of like, pitch in or kind of like take over your meeting, because it's definitely happened, right? Then you can then say, hey, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Build podcast. I am here with my host, Ogbe, and today we want to have a conversation regarding managing meetings effectively. So those work meetings that you find yourself in, where for some of them you may be heavily involved, maybe leading the meetings. For other ones, you may be a spectator for the meetings, and essentially just talk about how to navigate that situation, how to manage it effectively, get the most out of it, and give some tips on how to manage it effectively.
Yeah, that's very good. So a few sets of frameworks that I have. Like you said, first thing to think about is, what is this meeting for, right? And I think I generally define meetings into like a couple of like different like sections or categories. I think some meetings are informational. You're just to convey some knowledge, tell somebody, make somebody aware of something, and that's all the meeting is for.
But technically, right, for meetings like that, do they need to be meetings?
That is a different political problem.
Okay.
Ideally, though, yes, you should post that thing on like your Slack or something and get everybody to align. But the other thing you notice is that people don't be reading Slack.
That's true. I think if not even in Slack, in the context of docs, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how your company and your organization works, there's a lot of docs, right? At Netflix, we write docs for everything.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a problem and it needs to be fixed, they're like, go and write the doc. I know Amazon does it as well. They write one pages for everything.
Yep.
So sometimes people don't read those docs,
Yep.
and the whole aim of the meeting is to say, hey, this is information that you should kind of know, but we're then having this meeting to kind of maybe discuss some things in the doc. Yeah.
Exactly. The other category are, I think, like I kind of call them like alignment meetings, where it might not be the same thing as like you need to make a decision during a meeting, but like you need to get people to start to see something from a perspective. And I think those meetings are the hard ones.
Yeah.
Like it's always a mixed bag, because like you might say something and then 5 people have different opinions, and then you start a battle in the meeting, and then like it just spirals out of control, right? So I think like the different categories of meeting, and I think like the alignment meetings are usually the most easy to get wrong.
That's true. I think one, just off the top of my head, one thing that I've seen go wrong in meetings like that is inviting the wrong people.
Yo, exactly. Like honestly,
you bring so many people who have so many strong opinions to that meeting, and it just becomes a pissing contest.
Yes.
Where everyone wants to say, oh, this is the way I say this thing, or this is the way I see it. And then at the end of the meeting, there's no actual alignment for where we should be going, right? Like,
exactly.
We've just spent 1 hour where everyone is just saying what they feel.
Exactly.
And ultimately, a decision has to be made, right? But
exactly.
Those meetings, you don't end up with anything out of them.
Okay, so I think there are 2 different meetings then. There is alignment and there's decision making. So in decision making, yes, like honestly, like if it's a meeting where you want to leave that meeting with a yes or a no, if you have plenty of people in that meeting, like you're already doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I've been burnt by this a few times.
Yeah.
So but that's a very valid thing. My own philosophy of like decision meetings are, for a decision making meeting, the meeting actually should only be to rubber stamp. Everybody should have agreed with you before you make that meeting happen.
Yeah.
Do like 4 smaller meetings.
Yeah.
And get everybody to be on the same page.
Yeah, literally.
And then do the decision meeting.
Find this one, go and talk to him, be like, yo, this is what I'll do. What do you think, right?
Yeah.
They'll be like, yeah. I agree. Oh, maybe they agree, maybe they don't agree. Then go find the next person, then go find the next person. And then, ultimately that decision making is just formality at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because if you're trying to get all of those people to agree in the same meeting, in some cases it could work, but very, very unlikely, especially if you're dealing with principals and people who have very strong opinions about their work.
That's a very important thing to call out because it doesn't apply to everybody, right? If you have a decision-making meeting, there are people that will not be very vocal or people that they don't know enough in that decision-making meeting to like give strong opinions. On the other hand, if you have people that are like very, very senior or have very, very strong opinions because they are very, very much in the weed or they have lots of historical context, you want to have met all those people beforehand.
Yeah.
You should all be on the same page before you pull a meeting for that kind of use case, for that kind of like category. Because like if you are starting to figure things out during that meeting, they will destroy your meeting. Number one. Number two, it depends on how you're positioned in respect to that person. If the person is more senior than you in the company, the moment the person starts opposing something you're saying in the meeting, you've kind of already lost the meeting.
Yeah, because ultimately everyone just kind of leans towards that person, right? Everyone just says, yo, this is the guy, right? Yep. In certain organizations where principals and seniors have more power than managers themselves, you're pretty much already screwed because, as you said, the second they start opposing, no one wants to then see your point of view. Yeah. Everyone just starts looking at their point of view.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think ultimately, as you said, that decision-making meeting is more of a, hey, we have agreed to do this.
Yeah.
And like
week.
Exactly. We have all agreed to do this, right? Outside this room, I've had conversations with you, and you've all said yes. And this meeting is just for us to then say, yeah, ultimately. But it brings me back to your question regarding the first type of meeting, which was what?
The informational meeting.
The informational meeting. How do you typically align or how do you structure those for yourself?
Different companies have different like
philosophies.
Yeah, philosophies, practices. So, for example, I took a course by Steve Wynn. He's a very popular YouTuber about writing. But generally, informational meetings, you kind of want to have written about it before and made it easy to digest. That is a lot of work, by the way.
I was literally about to say it's like at a certain point in time, you start doing less coding and more. Well, technically, there's a planning phase, right? The planning phase is when you're doing all of this, right? Yeah. And then once you then say, hey, this is what's going to happen, then you then do the implementation. But you're right. At some point in time, you're spending a lot of time writing these docs, like laying out the information for people to have it to be as simple as possible for them.
Yeah. And like honestly, like that's it's a very important skill. It's a very tough skill to get. And like also it's a skill that like if you're in a smaller place where everybody thinks alike or everybody has the same context, it's easy to inform them. If you're in a place where like some people are coming with, some people have only a business perspective, some people have a variety of perspectives, those informational meetings sometimes can also get contentious. But generally, if you send out material beforehand, it's kind of easy to manage an informational meeting. There are a couple of other tricks as well, right? Like, for example, if you're calling out a meeting, if you own the meeting and you're sending out the invite, have everything linked already. But then besides having them linked in the meeting invite, have an agenda and then also be ready to pull out things within the meeting. Like, this is by the way why I like remote work, by the way. Because remote work, everybody's on their computer already. People can sideline to look at a Word document during the meeting. So what that means is you can say, hey, like this thing you just asked, I already wrote about it in this doc, or this is already how to think about it. And the conversation can go on. This is part of why like informational meetings, honestly, it's always a good idea. Like that's why I love working with my PM. With really good PMs, they can drive the meeting and then let you do all of the unholding to get the consensus. It's like you're tag teaming against all the people that you're talking to. If you have a good PM, you could do that. If you have like colleagues as well, you could do that as well. So like you already have a lot of the material. You've thought about, hey, the people that I'm talking to, what do they want to hear? What kind of things matter to them? And you've kind of built material that's structured to that is easy to digest for them. And then I think like informational meetings tend to generally, people will not read your document, to be very honest. But you sent it before. And
it's there. And if they have any specific question, you can give a high-level answer and say, if you want more details, go to that document.
Exactly.
Right? And it just shows that you've taken the initiative to actually put things together. Speaking of that document, I think going back to conveying that information, right? You basically hit me to say there are different people from different places that care about this thing in different ways.
Yes.
That's something that was kind of tricky for me to learn.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you want to give as much information as possible. But if you're giving information to a group of people that don't care about it, then the meeting is absolutely, for lack of a better way of putting it, useless to them.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of like also aligning on saying, okay, who am I bringing to this meeting and what do they want to hear?
Yeah.
Right? Because PMs know how to do this very well, right? If they're presenting to like software engineers, for example, then they kind of talk and phrase things a specific way, right? When they are talking to leadership and like above, they phrase things a specific way, right?
Yeah.
I remember very, very early on, I used to focus on technical details too much and less on outcomes, right? Less on saying, okay, the outcome of this thing is going to be this thing. And then ultimately that's what I then learned in specific scenarios that, you know, you can talk about all these technical details, but they're looking for something at the end of the day. And it obviously comes with time as well, right?
Yeah.
Where the second you say this thing and people start raising their hands up, right? Or people start saying, oh, okay, that's really good. And you can also tell based on the type of questions that they ask you back as well. Yeah.
And like when you're doing meetings, for example, and you find that lots of people are raising their hands and you have an agenda, you now need to make a decision about like, I think it's a balance between what is the meeting for.
Yeah.
If you're just to informing them and they are raising their hands to ask questions about information, and you can probably say, hey, you know what? I want to rush through this, but ask in Slack if you have a colleague that's going to help you answer. Or you could say, hey, like I will actually reach out to you and I will understand what it is you're saying. So like maybe sometimes like allow them ask the question, maybe. Other times like say, hey, like I'm trying to run and hit this timeline. I'm trying to reach the end of the meeting and get the information passed and everybody says they're fine. So I'm going to skip your question now in the interest of time, but I'm going to reach out to you. And like, please do, right? Yeah, but that's how I think about like balancing that.
I think back to the course of the meeting too, like I recently had a meeting where I was presenting an incident that happened because of a change that I made. And so I owned the whole incident. I wrote parts of the doc and my mentor at work wrote parts of the doc. Now, the way the incident doc was kind of like formatted, it was in a weird way where it wasn't telling a story, right?
Yeah.
It was like, I think it was like, this is the cause. No. This is the impact of the incident. Then these are some things that made the incident hard. And then at the end was then the cause.
Yeah.
And it was tricky for me because when I was then going to present that, I was presenting off that doc.
Yeah.
And my mental flow of how I wanted to present was, hey, this thing happened.
Yeah.
Because of this thing then happened.
Yeah.
And then this was the impact. And then this is how we rolled back and fixed it.
Yeah.
But the doc had a different flow. And then the doc was what I had shared with people. So I found myself being like going back and forth between the doc and my mental state where I would say something and then I would go to the doc and then realize, I was not supposed to say that thing until like a specific time. It's like your mental state on how you want to present and your doc, if they don't align, then it can throw people off.
I think like those are two things as well. And I think this goes back to something you were saying earlier, which is you want to tailor the material to the audience. When I'm doing a meeting, right? When I'm like working on something, for example, a project, you can have one very big doc that has everything, and then you can have like this is one of the good things about Microsoft that has happened recently in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. Google Docs. Google Docs now has like subtabs within the doc.
Yeah, subtabs within really, really clutch. Yeah.
So one of the things I do is like I would say, hey, like alignment with team A, alignment with team B, alignment with team C, and then you can slim down the context anybody has to get to actually be useful. So for example, in your scenario about like root causing, you might, for example, find that you can tab and like heading 1, heading 2 type stuff, but make it so that you can easily navigate from the sideline of the doc. So if you need to jump around within the doc, you're not jumping around by scrolling up and down. That messes you up.
Yeah, it just threw me off completely. And then after the meeting, one of the principal on the team, they reached out to give me some feedback and they were like, hey, they knew of the incident, but one of the feedback that they gave me was next time, send this doc out, let people read it, and either present it your way or present it using the doc's way, but don't try to mix both
of them.
Because first of all, it was also my first time presenting. Secondly, I was presenting about an incident that happened a month after I joined because of me. So there was already like nerves there. Yeah. But she was like, the next time, or not even next time, the next time you are presenting on this, do it this way. She also gave me feedback about how to talk about the lessons that we learned from the incident, but that's a conversation for a completely different day. Yeah.
But you called out something important, which is when you actually do meetings, you're not going to get it right the first few times.
Oh, absolutely.
And like, honestly, after like years of meetings, you're still not going to get it right. But you want to find who can give you like good feedback. So that's a very important thing. You mentioned like a principal give you feedback, but finding someone that's going to be like, hey, you could have done this better. But you also have to be proactive about this, right? Like reach out to people when somebody comes to your meeting for the first time, somebody you've never worked with before.
Yeah.
Present, like have the meeting, do it, and then immediately after go and reach out and say, hey, what did you think about this?
Yeah, I think off the top of my head, I'm just thinking on the meetings that I did while I was at Microsoft that worked well. There was always an outcome, right? I always had an outcome. I always had something that I wanted to walk out of the meeting with.
Yeah.
And I sort of always let it be known initially.
Yes.
Hey all, thank you for showing up to this meeting. The aim of this meeting is for us to align on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
The aim of this meeting is for me to tell you about this, and this, and then discuss what we'll do after. The aim of this meeting, right? So that's a good way to start meetings as well, because it kind of helps everyone align to say, okay, this is where we're going towards. Now, if one Agbero has his own context, right? Or has his own side agenda, right?
Yep.
And he's trying to then kind of like, pitch in or kind of like take over your meeting, because it's definitely happened, right? Then you can then say, hey, what you're saying is absolutely very, very important, but ultimately the goal of this meeting is for this. And maybe if we want to talk about that thing, right? Provided that thing is not like important, like groundbreaking important, right? Then we can schedule another meeting to like speak about it. But otherwise, have an intention for why you're there. And then make sure at the end of the meeting, you make sure that that goal was sort of achieved.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, then that's something for you to then think about and look after as well, right? And another thing that I like to do is notes, right? Taking notes during meetings as well. I don't like to do it if I'm the one leading the meeting.
Yeah.
So I typically either have someone else help me do it, or I use AI.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're doing a Zoom meeting, honestly, like the Zoom AI companion is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
Honestly, because like if you're leading the meeting and then you are just like in the space actually listening and participating, it's hard to, while actively listening and participating, to pull yourself out and make the notes and make sure they make sense. So honestly, if you're leading a meeting, if it's informational, maybe not.
Yeah.
If it is, you're trying to drive alignment, trying to get to a decision, you probably want, well, actually have AI for every meeting.
Yeah.
But I mean, like recording, you should probably try to record decision-making meetings, meetings.
Yeah.
Because like then you could go back, you say, hey, because somebody might raise a point and raise an objection. But honestly, the person raised it in the first 5 minutes of the meeting, and it was a 1 hour meeting. It was a 30-minute meeting. You're going to have forgotten all of the context around why the person was objecting. You can't go back. But if you have AI, you have recording, and this is one of the things why I really love Zoom. You could go back in time to see what was happening at that point and review that thing. And then when you reach out to the person, you're like, hey, this is like, I saw you said this, but like maybe you were wrong, or like, how do I get you to a better spot about this thing that we need to make a decision on?
Yeah.
The AI, the recording really does help with
Yeah,
that.
I think it's really, really clutch. It also does something that I really like, is list out action items after.
Action items after your meeting are, like, again, decision alignment.
Yeah.
Action, like even informational meetings, action items are always super important.
Yeah.
And action items and notes from the meeting. One of the things I find is that there are two ways to think about this. When you have all those things, put it in a Google Doc somewhere.
Yeah.
You might send it out as a response to the meeting invite. But if you Google Doc somewhere, you guys can agree on all the most important things. Exactly. It's all gone. Like the meeting is gone. Everybody forgets. Everybody moves on. Everybody is very, very busy. I think that's one thing you should always, like, if you always like realize that everybody's very busy, everybody's struggling with what they're struggling with, you want to essentially just have, like, put it in a, use Google Doc, whatever your company uses is fine.
Yeah.
But put it in a Google Doc. If there's somebody that's supposed to own it, tag them. You own it.
Yeah.
And then give yourself a reminder to say, hey, I will check back in XYZ day to do this. It's one of those things where, like, I think it's a mental shift for me, because, like, I think a younger me used to think, like, oh, that was very, very PME. And like I'm an engineer, not supposed to do that. I think it's one of those things where as you grow, you realize that roles are not like standalone things. A good person is rounded at multiple things, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things you're doing is PMing during the meetings.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, we agreed this. What's up? How's it going?
Yeah. And ultimately, like send that follow-up email with this thing, right? Hey, thank you all for taking X, Y, and Z time to meet today. Here are some stuff that we discussed. Next steps, James is going to, sync with so and so team and let us know if this thing is going to be possible by X date.
Yep.
This person is going to do this, blah, 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 blah. And then I am going to do this. Looking for, essentially that whole PME stuff. But ultimately, as you said, right, it's not a role, right? It's not I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Just because you're an engineer, that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to do those things, right? Yes. I think the whole mental model of engineer, code. Nah, right? Ultimately, when you, the higher you get, the less code you actually write, right? Yeah. And the more people, the more projects, the more groups you actually manage. And kind of like learning how to hone those skills now is definitely something that helps you in the long run. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like there is no like substitute for like being very effective at meetings, honestly. Yeah. And like I think one of the things I think I read was when they were talking about Sundar Pichai. Sundar Pichai was a PM that became
the CEO, yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, almost every other PM couldn't do what Sundar Pichai could do. And what I heard was like Sundar Pichai would go into a meeting about the gnarliest topic and then get a next steps out of it.
Yeah.
People will be mad about stuff and it's super political, but Sundar would go to those meetings and get what is happening next out of it. And like being able to wrangle out like a path when there is uncertainty was what I understood was like one of the really strong points that led him to grow his career that way.
Yeah. I think the politics and the gnarliness of some of these meetings are very, like in theory they shouldn't be, because it's like, we're kind of like aligned to do this thing. But as I said, everyone has their own agenda. Everyone has their own opinion. And ultimately, if you're the one that is leading the project that will then affect this person, affect that person, you have to be the one to own it, right? Yeah. You have to be the one to say, yes, this is what is going to happen. You have to be the one to then kind of like drive all those things. And the more effective you are in bringing people together through everything we've mentioned, right? Having the docs, having different sections of the doc, make sure the meetings are recorded. Yep. If it's a decision-making doc, make sure you made decisions with everybody first before then coming to the doc. Yep. Before then coming to the meeting.
Yep.
Send out the doc beforehand. When you start talking, make sure you have a clear output so everyone is on the same page. Yeah. And ultimately, it takes time and it takes practice. There's also some interpersonal relationships there, right? You may know how someone likes to be spoken to, or how someone likes to absorb specific information, and with time you'll basically kind of like learn how to give them what they want to hear. So exactly. I think it's just something that just gets better with time.
Oh yeah. And like again, like it's a meetings, running effective meetings, running meetings effectively are a muscle. You need to learn how to use that.
Yeah.
And like honestly, the better you get at doing this, at running effective meetings, I think the farther you could go, it's much easier for you to solve problems. And like the more you realize that, you know what, you don't have to like you know what the meeting is for. You know that, you know what, this person might not agree, but you can weigh how much they agree or disagree. You learn sometimes someone might politics, but you learn all the interpersonal things that makes like things actually happen. So yeah, I think that's my own perspective on this.
Absolutely. Do you have any other thing to add as we wrap up?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Finally, remember, meetings are very expensive from a company perspective. If you put 12 people in a meeting room, you're costing your company a couple $1,000 if you're in the US.
Yeah.
So like being very effective with meetings and making sure letting people leave those meetings feeling like there was value in me coming to this meeting and I got something out of it, or I gave very, very useful input is something that will like allow you to be a very, very standout, at least meeting organizer. Absolutely.
I think from the personal perspective as well, as if you're in those meetings and you're not contributing, just try to absorb as much information as possible. Learn. If it's a meeting that you absolutely do not have to be in, then there's no need for you to be there. Your time is better spent doing something else. And I say this because when I first joined Microsoft, I used to attend every meeting, every listen. They say they are doing, I'm there. They are doing this one, I'm there. they are doing this one. Like, and then ultimately I spoke with my manager and I was telling him, yeah, I'm going to this meeting, I'm going to that meeting. He's like, oh, why are you going? I was like, oh, I thought I need to be there. He's like, you can go if you want to, but you don't need to be there. The no button is there on the meeting invite for a reason, right? Or so just kind of finding ways to align your time and making sure that you're using your time as wise as possible. But again, there are certain meetings that it's good for you to go to, and then you see that if you're getting value from it, maybe you can keep going, but otherwise don't feel the need to go to every meeting.
Yep, that's super important.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're at time. Thanks everybody for this episode of Beyond the Build. Good luck with your meetings. Umar, anything else?
Nope. We will catch you on the next one. Thanks for listening and watching wherever you are. Peace.